Hello again, everyone, and welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Megan Fleming, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager here at Inova Software. So to get started, I'd like to say thank you for taking the time to attend our webinar. I know that you're all very busy, especially since it's the end of Q4, but we're really excited to be hosting this webinar. It's one in a series of our events which gather the biopharma community to exchange on key industry best practices. Just to give you an idea of who is on the call today, we have over 150 people registered coming from all kinds of life science companies, from small biotechs to top 50 pharma companies. And as you know, today's topic is building a business development powerhouse. So today's webinar is a panel discussion featuring Tim Noblitt, who is the Director of Corporate Business Development at Eli Lilly, Chris Vlahos, who is Head of Rare Disease External Innovation at Ipsen, and Dylan Kisan, who is the Head of Marketing here at Inova. Before we dive in, I have just a few of administrative logistics. Your microphones will be on mute during the presentation so that we can minimize background noise. If you have any questions during the discussion, please just type them in the chat window and we'll work through them as we can. After the presentations, we'll open it up for further discussion and questions with our panelists. We are going to record this webinar, so if you have colleagues that couldn't make it today, or if you want to watch it again later to refresh your memory, we'll send you a link to the recording. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dylan so we can get started.
Okay, so thanks, Megan, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. My name is Dylan Kisan. I'm here at Inova. On behalf of Inova, I'd like to welcome everybody here to the webinar. And really today, our focus is one thing. It's how to build this business development powerhouse. I'm joined today, like Megan said, by a couple of experts from industry. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves before we get going. So to Chris Vlahos, perhaps we can start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing at Ipsen.
Sure, thanks Dylan. Hi everybody, my name is Chris Vlahos. I'm the Global Head for External Innovation. I cover both rare disease and neuroscience at Ipsen. I've been with Ipsen about a year. I joined November of last year. Prior to that, I was with Eli Lilly. Started out as a scientist in the research labs in cardiovascular, moved into process development, and then the last 10 years of my career at Lilly, I spent in external innovation in a similar role where I covered cardiometabolic disease.
It's great to have you here, Chris. We're also joined by Tim Noblitt of Eli Lilly. Tim, tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing at Eli.
Sure. I have been with Lilly for 23 years. I spent 10 years in the labs at IU before that. But at Lilly, I've been in our discovery labs, I've been in our development functions and clinical trial area, and I've spent quite a bit of time in process development. That's what ultimately brought me to the business development group. My role in the BD group here at Lilly is it's an operational role where I'm providing support for all the individuals that are out all over the globe looking for cool, bright, shiny objects. Do reporting up through all of our senior leadership, and just help maintain actually the Inova system for Lilly to make sure that everybody's aware of what's going on within that system and that there's clear transparency throughout our organization and what's going on with business development deals.
Well, welcome to you both. Thanks for joining us here at Inova. Tim, if I can continue with you, you talked a little bit then about the hierarchy in your organization, but maybe you can talk more generally to how your business development team is organized today at Lilly.
Starting from the beginning, I mentioned finding a cool, bright, shiny objects. We have several different teams that all report up through our Chief Scientific Officer. There's 7 or 8 teams that actually have different reporting structures that feed into that. Once it gets into that Chief Scientific Officer, where where all of the therapeutic area vice presidents are reviewing things. Then it begins to get narrower. We have a dedicated due diligence leadership group who work very hard at evaluating what that item is. And then once we've determined that that cool, bright, shiny object is something a bit more, then it feeds into our transaction or our business development experts, where they're working on the getting it role, if you will. So that's the find it, evaluate it, get it piece. That's how we structure it. There's also a fairly well-developed organization downstream that does alliance management work. It's also a key in our external innovation strategy.
So you don't have any differentiation then by geography? It's just by therapeutic area?
No, we do have differentiation by geography, but the differentiation is really early versus late, or technology versus molecules that we're looking at. We have a presence in, let's start east and work our way west. So we have a presence in Japan, China, the UK, New York, actually Philadelphia, Indianapolis, and California. So we're pretty much around the globe. We work anywhere and do our best at trying to make sure that we're not always asking the client to come to Indiana. We really like to be able to go on and meet people where they are. It works out better, I think, for everyone that way.
Chris, you've got a different sort of organization there at Ipsen. Can you tell us a little bit how you work business development and how you organize that team inside of rare disease?
Sure. So we have the three same work streams as Lilly in terms of external innovation, business development, and alliance management. But they all report up to the same individual, Ivana Levish, who is our Chief Business Officer. She reports directly to our CEO. Under external innovation, which is the group in which I'm based, we're split into therapeutic areas. So again, I cover rare disease and neuroscience, and then have colleagues who cover our oncology unit, which is our other main therapeutic area. We're primarily based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, even though the headquarters of the company is in Paris. We do have some business development and alliance management personnel in Europe, mostly in Paris, a couple in the UK, and the rest of us are all based and co-localized in Cambridge.
Okay. What about when it comes to people who are outside of the organization, external agents, scouts who work outside, and brokers? Chris, do you find yourself relying on those people as well?
We use quite a bit of external sources, both external to our organization as well as external to the company. So external to the organization, Ipsen is primarily a development company. We don't have a discovery research program, with the exception of a small team in our neurotoxin area. And so we leverage translational medicine, our clinical group, our medical affairs group, commercial group, et cetera, to help us even in the early evaluation. And we also work with a lot of external consulting groups that'll do anything from technical analysis to KOL to even some market/commercial work.
And Tim, at Lilly, it's similar as well, right? You're relying on some external actors to bring in expertise to the organization?
Absolutely. I think Chris made a fine point. There's two definitions of external. The external innovation community here at Lilly is a fairly structured and walled off kind of a group from the rest of the internal programs. So we consider external to that group or external to the company as a whole. We are no longer surprised at where really good ideas come from. They come from all over the place. Investment banks is a group that Chris didn't mention that we actually work with fairly often. And just a strong network of individuals in the scientific field that we work with and have worked with over time that are routinely recommending that we look at different things. Another group that actually is a very, very strong advocate are individuals that have retired from Lilly, who are still in consulting roles themselves. They'll reach out to us on a regular occasion and suggest we look at different opportunities.
You know, it's interesting that you say these opportunities come from all over the place, because one of the things that Inova hears from clients is now everybody's a scout. Everyone within the organization is meant to be a scout, whether they're in business development, whether they're in innovation or technology scouting. Is it much the same way there at Lilly?
It absolutely is. 10 years ago, that would not have been something that I think that everybody would have really embraced all that much. However, the successes that we've had with some of our larger transactions and deals that we've announced, along with a great deal of internal effort that's been applied to those, there's been a strong interest in what external innovation really means, and there's been a much greater willingness of our internal scientists to understand that there's great ideas everywhere. And we're not going to have all the great ideas, and we need to find out where those great ideas are and work with those individuals in ways that are going to help patients.
Chris, is everyone a scout at Ipsen as well?
Technically, we have to be. We've stated publicly to our employees that everybody is scouting for us. Again, not having a discovery research effort means if we're going to grow our pipeline, we have to buy it and build it. And so, you know, one of the challenges we have, and I'm sure other organizations face the same thing, is while everybody's a scout, we don't want everybody talking to external partners. We'd like the opportunities to get filtered into the external innovation group so that we can both manage the contact as well as manage the further communication with the partner. So the partner's not talking to hearing a lot of different voices and most likely different stories within the organization. So there's a consistency with the message and a consistency with the contact. And so even though everybody's out there helping us, we ask them also to work with us and make sure that, you know, that, and quite honestly, that's our day job and not their day job to manage those communications. As you know, and I'm sure Tim can appreciate, there's a lot of administrative things that sometimes needs to be handled with the partner, and we'd rather, you know, we do it all the time. We'd rather not have somebody outside of the organization trying to handle some of that.
How important then do the personal relationships become between your team and external technologies, people with assets for out licensing? How important are the personal relationships you're building up in actually building a partnership?
They're essential. I mean, you know, so there's two things we're trying to do. One is establish our brand, our company. You know, we've been in rare disease for a long time, but we've stated that we're going to actually build a rare disease franchise just in the last year. We've done 2 deals this year in the space. So people now are recognizing us as being present in the area. And as a result, we're starting to get a lot of inbound traffic, people approaching us to possibly do some deals. And then, you know, the other key piece to it is just the touch points. So we, you know, want to make sure that as we interact with external partners, that, you know, we want them to realize that we're a partner of choice, and therefore, you know, we will engage at different conferences or other opportunities where we have a chance to see the partner and make sure we stay on top of, you know, how trials are going and you know, just talk science for lack of better words.
Tim, the personal relationships still count even in an organization as big as Lilly, right?
Absolutely. I want to, it's kind of a joke that you hear in the external innovation group here, that every deal dies at least 3 times before it gets signed. And the routine answer that we typically give a party is typically, well, not yet. It's usually not a flat out no. It's usually let's continue to discuss and let's continue to work together, even if we're not going to get to a deal at this point. For 2 reasons. One is really that the folks in the external innovation group here have a strong and deep expertise in their scientific field of interest, and they enjoy having the scientific discussions, and it's rewarding for them in that way. However, the other piece to that is there's a lot of things that we can do without a deal in place to help external parties move something down the road, where eventually we might be interested. We may never actually sign a deal with them. However, if we can advance science in that way, that's also a benefit to everyone. And it's a role that is stated pretty unequivocally: build relationships and maintain them, because you never know when something is going to bear fruit.
Talking of those relationships, you mentioned to me a couple of days ago when we were talking that you've even had biotechs reach out by LinkedIn in an effort to try and get onto your radar there. Is it common to be getting these approaches from all over today, even on social networks?
Absolutely. With understanding what the role is when you see a profile like that, you get a lot of people reaching out with some great ideas and some things. We're a bit more focused on the types of things that we look at than a rare disease type approach where Chris is looking at. So it's easier for us to understand strategy probably, but we get requests to review opportunities from all over the place. And then one of the ones that creates a lot of excitement is that when one of our senior leadership has a relationship with someone, they use those relationships, they build them and they cultivate them. Somebody reaches out to them and it becomes the project of the day where everybody's working on that one because you have a CSO or a CEO that's interested in something. It drives a lot of activity and it drives a lot of effort to review that large number of opportunities from wherever they come. But one of the things that Lilly tries to do is to make sure that everybody gets an answer. Because if somebody's reaching out to us, we try to make a commitment that they get an answer to the question that they're asking.
Chris, Tim just mentioned that the answer is often going to be a not yet or not just yet. Is that similar? Is that you find yourself talking to biotechs and giving them that sort of response as well?
It is. We also try to provide some feedback. So if they had certain set of data, what would make it more attractive, or if it's not, if we don't find the differentiation or other, potential gaps for the molecule, we try to articulate that and see if they may come back in a year with a new data set, and we'll review it de novo. It's important to keep the door open because you never know. People move around in the industry, go from company to company, and so they may come back to us. The individual may come back to us with something new from a new locale. The company could have a major breakthrough. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why we would want to hear back again. More data, new opportunities, et cetera. So we want to make sure we maintain that.
Just let me add, our internal strategies may change as well. So that we may be looking at an asset and come to the conclusion it's not really in the space that we're looking at, but a year later that may change, and that happens quite often actually.
Good point.
And that would speak again to the importance of those personal relationships, to keeping in contact with people at the pharma company, right?
Absolutely.
Just for everybody watching the webinar, there's a couple of questions that have started to come through. We're going to get to them. It'll be in a little while, just after we've finished a little bit more discussion, but they're definitely there. And if you have questions, please pop them in the chat. We will get to them at the end of the discussion there. Chris, let's talk a little bit more about those leads that come in. How do you go about triaging the leads? How do you go about separating the wheat from the chaff, finding the little nice shiny objects?
Yeah, so we have a couple processes in place that we kind of use throughout the evaluation. Again, being a small organization, many of the opportunities that come to us can be immediately triaged. They're not strategically aligned with what we're doing, may not be differentiated. The science just may be in the wrong areas for us, and so those are relatively simple to triage. The ones that look interesting. I chair two evaluation teams, one in neuroscience and one in rare disease. And again, it's comprised of people within our organization from translational medicine, our clinical team, and our commercial team primarily, and also our transaction folks, business development team. And we look at the asset. So normally I'll do an initial assessment recommendation. But we'll discuss it and see whether others may have inputs on it that make the case stronger or weaker on it, and depending on how that goes, for the ones that look like they may be of interest, we'll take a deeper dive into it. We'll engage with the partner on a confidential basis, and in that case, have a team meeting with the partner to let them present their case. And as the molecule continues to advance in terms of level of interest, we'll also start to use what we call pre-diligence. So rather than initially commencing a full due diligence effort, we'll try to identify perhaps the one or two areas, what are the key questions that could potentially undermine the program, and then take advantage of experts within our organization, and maybe toxicology, it may be CMC, it may be regulatory interactions or clinical trial design. Whatever we find that could be key questions, we'll focus there first, do a deep diligence assessment, which could include an e-room dive, checking through the partner's data. And if that comes back positive, if there's no red flags there, then that allows us to move forward into a full due diligence.
Tim, at Lilly, what are the sorts of questions that are being asked when you come to triage the leads that are coming in?
So again, because of the strategies that our therapeutic areas are kind of focused around, it's relatively easy for them to understand very, very quickly, even in a non-confidential type of interaction, whether an asset may or may not fit the strategy that a group is looking for. However, having said that, there are so many different groups that are tangential to each other. We have a technology group that is more focused on technologies and collaborations. So an opportunity may come in that's an immunology type of an asset. However, it's actually something more interested for that group. And so there's actually a fair amount of interaction between groups. The immunology group and the oncology group talk a lot about things. We actually have an academic group that's more focused on academic types of discussions. But the real task is, does it fit the strategy? And if the answer to that is yes, some of the other questions that we are asking and that we're focusing our entire portfolio, internal and external, on is it best in class or is it first in class? Those are things that we work very hard towards establishing. So we're looking for very unique, interesting, great science. We always love to see clinical data if it's there, and that's not always the case. We'll still look at things that don't. And another aspect is what type of a discussion or type of relationship is being sought here. Is it an M&A, or is it a collaboration, or is it just an investment? There's so many different ways that we have to interact with external groups that all of those questions come into play relatively early before we even go into a very deep dive into what the asset is. Once all those things get looked at and we have an approach that we want to move forward with, our therapeutic area vice presidents become involved and begin to champion that particular asset for the entire team. That then it goes into a lot of the same types of things that Chris was talking about, confidential. We talk some early terms, we talk diligence, and then we get into some very deep involved contracting types of work.
How important is that role of an internal champion for a particular asset?
Critical. Nothing goes forward without it. It's a question that's asked with everything that comes forward. Who wants this, and who's willing to make a trade-off for it, and who's going to use it, who's going to be the champion once we get this thing in-house. That is one of the earliest questions that gets asked. And it's not always clear, but before it moves forward too far, that's something that really gets established.
And Chris, I imagine it works the same at Ipsen there, especially in a smaller organization. You've got to have someone driving that asset forward.
Sure. So we try to build that interest immediately. We won't take something to our governance committees and to our board unless we have somebody from the therapeutic area saying they want it for their pipeline. Quite honestly, if the therapeutic area doesn't want it, Why should we go take it all the way up and create the noise in the work stream if it's not going to have an internal support?
Having said that, there's always this aspect of sometimes the early team needs to work really hard at getting the potential sponsor to understand why it's of value. So there is some work that's typically done to make sure that there's a clear understanding of the opportunity and the upside for it, because it's not always clear to them. And it's something that, again, as Chris was saying, this is our day job. This is what we do all the time. So it's easy for us to see some of those things sometimes when it's not necessarily for the internal individuals to actually recognize.
Let's talk about that day job and the teams that you lead then. You've got to measure the performance of these teams and these individuals and the teams right across the year, see how effective they are at bringing business in, adding value to the business. Quantitative performance metrics, key performance indicators, KPIs, these are terms that we would normally use in business to assess our teams. Is it possible to put a metric on an individual's performance? Is there something that you're tracking? Maybe Tim first, how are we assessing the success and the value adding of your team?
So at the highest level, there's not an individual's performance that's really looked at. We're looking at the entire external innovation community as a whole. And one of the things that we really do is we don't treat every signed transaction equally. A phase 3 gets more weight than a phase 1 does, for example, or a collaboration. They all count, but the primary focus of our external innovation program is to augment our internal portfolio. What we want to be able to do is to find opportunities outside of our organization that we can bring in and then put into our internal program and help patients. That's the key. Everything else is a bit subservient to that, and the other transactions that we do, they may enable those programs, but the biggest bang for the buck, if you will, are those clinical assets that are going to be a part of our internal portfolio. Then comes the target type of deals that we do that are going to help lead to assets that are going to go into the clinic. Then collaborations, and we have investments that we run those count. The one thing that we've really tried to get away from is a strict, this is the number of deals that we've signed, because that can be a false positive, if you will. It can lead you to the wrong behaviors. However, if you dig down into the teams, they keep a very, very close eye on the number of things that they look at. And so the leaders of each one of these individual teams will want to know all the time, how many CDAs have we seen? How many things have we taken to diligence? How many things have we looked at that's just in a non-confidential fashion? And one of the things that I use to describe the overall process, a lot of people see it as a funnel. I don't. I see it as a tornado. And those individual teams are in the maelstrom of this whirlwind of effort that's going on. And it's usually about 10 times the number of things that we actually look at that ever get into the business development process itself. So it's a great deal of work, and I know that is actually one of the tools that we use to help us understand what individuals and the individual teams are doing, and it helps with that quite a bit.
Maybe I turn to you, Chris. What sort of metrics, what sort of performance indicators are you using to assess your team and the way that they add value to the business?
Yeah, so we set team objectives, and then our personal objectives are kind of based on contribution to team objectives. You know, whether we like it or not, you know, the absolute metric is deals. We're here to do deals. One can argue on external innovation, we're here to tee up substrate, and it's the business development folks that actually, you know, do the deal. But at the end of the day, that's how the entire group is measured, and we're all one team here at Ipsen in external innovation. But we're also looking at other key parameters in terms of We have a ventures group that's making investments, and our team is involved in helping in the evaluation. We've set up a collaboration with BioLab. So we had some lab space that essentially was unused when we got out of discovery research. And we're now housing about a dozen startup companies, very small, in our Cambridge, Massachusetts site. And again, our external innovation team is involved in helping to review and select potential companies that would come into that. And it's all part of contributing to the community, contributing to awareness of Ipsen and the like. And so there are other areas of involvement that we in external innovation are doing, whether it's working with the local biotech communities in our respective locations, doing reviews for NIH and other areas, kind of extending to the scientific community. At the end of the day, it's deals. I think that trumps everything. If we've got a couple of deals signed in a year, and as Tim said, some deals are more impactful than others, and that also helps with the visibility and the awareness of our group. Again, our team is responsible for adding to the pipeline. We don't have competing efforts that are coming up through R&D. And so, there's a big awareness from, our executive leadership on down of the importance of doing external innovation and getting deals done. And the company's very focused and committed to us to get deals done. So that's the expectation. We have to do deals.
Something else that we've heard from our clients when we talk to them is that everything's moving faster and that there's an incredible pressure on teams to move faster, to close deals more quickly, to accelerate the development. Tim, is that pressure on at Lilly as well?
It certainly is. Once we are in a position to say, yes, this is something that we definitely want to go after, we actually have the luxury of a relatively large organization that's able to shift resources around and make the priority effort the priority effort. Our position is we never want to be the cause of slowing something down that we want. And so once that decision is made, we like to be able to move as fast as the external party is willing to go. It's happened more than once. We've made rather large transactions in less than 30 days from early parts of the process on. We are willing to go that fast when it's something that everybody agrees that we want to do it. We actually have multiple operational projects that we've ran this year just to try and make sure that we know the things that get in the way of moving fast, so that when the time comes, we can pull the trigger and we can go as fast as we possibly can. Absolutely critical pressure, more and more.
And what sort of tools and technologies and processes are you putting in place to make sure you can move faster?
I think with most of these types of transactions, the challenge is how is everybody seeing what they need to see? So information, and we have a very, very structured internal process and set of tools on how we share information. And one of the challenges that we have is once somebody becomes part of one of these transactions, there has to be an understanding of this is an external party, it's their information. We don't have a contract yet. You can't take this back to your lab. And so we really make sure that there's a clear set of walls and processes and procedures in place that say, here's your role in this project. There's a wall between that and our internal programs. Make sure that it's there. But it's the information structure and the information sharing that we use. We have SharePoint that we use, and that's the key way that we make sure that we're targeting information to the right folks. And then we have very standard meetings that are set up where governance types of discussions occur. Those are weekly, and we have ad hoc meetings all the time, but routinely we can get most of that done in those weekly meetings that occur where our senior leadership is committed to being there and answering questions so that we can move the ball forward. The information is probably the key issue that we have, and it works reasonably well at this point for us. It's pretty well developed.
Chris, I know when we talked before, you said there's also this pressure to move fast and this real need to move fast there at Ipsen. But you also mentioned that experience on your team is one of the things that helps your organization move faster. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. No, there's a critical need to go fast, especially when we did the Clementia deal last year. It was an acquisition. We actually approached the company, so they were not in a process. We did an unsolicited bid to the company, and once you put a company in play, you worry that others can come in, and if you're going too slow, the bankers will try to find a better deal. And so we needed to move very quickly. We actually ran our due diligence over Christmas and New Year's to get it done as quickly as possible, including daily calls with our diligence team. So we set up a process where we appointed team captains for R&D and CM&C, et cetera, on the functions. They had calls with their team immediately afterwards. We had calls with the team captains, and we made sure, basically, what questions are still so what did you learn today? What questions are still unresolved? What do you need in terms of documentation? What do you need from the other teams? So that way we made sure the captains were talking to each other and documented that every day as we move forward to the diligence. So we established a number of those processes. And it helps that in the external innovation group that we have experienced people who have done external innovation before. So we don't have people who are trying to learn. It goes beyond the science. Let me put it that way. There's excellent science, but there's also an ability to move kind of beyond how good is the experiment to is this a drug or not. And so we want people who have experience in drug discovery, drug development, and other functions that are part of the team that have done this drill before and can recognize the difference between something that's nice science versus something that really looks like it could make its way through the clinic.
What about teams outside of BD, outside of science there, like legal, like finance? You've got to be tied pretty closely into them to move quick.
We do. We have dedicated support in legal, both on the patent side as well as on the contract side. We have dedicated regulatory support. Our organization does have full capabilities in terms of preclinical drug safety, ADME, CM&C, and clinical operations, clinical development. So we have all of the necessary tools to take a molecule that's, let's say, at IND stage and take it all the way across the goal line, plus a commercial organization as well. And so we do have that support. And again, because external innovation is so important to the growth of our pipeline, it's ingrained in our all of our cross-functional support that contribution to external innovation is how we grow, and so we have their attention 24/7, which is great. I mean, it's a really good organization. When something pops up for due diligence, we get immediate representation from the functions. We've got that coordinated with one of our project managers in the R&D organization who helps assemble our teams, and so we can move very quickly in that regard.
Now, just a reminder to everyone: do put your questions in the chat there. There are a couple that have come through in the last 10 minutes or so. We're going to probably talk for another 5 or so minutes, and then we're going to jump straight into your questions. So now's the time to get them in. Tim, previously you talked about personal relationships being really important, and one of the places where those relationships can be formed between biotechs and pharma, or between pharma companies as well, is big industry events, business meetings. Sometimes we just call them speed dating meetings. Are you investing in those sorts of events at Lilly? Are you on the ground?
Absolutely. We go to all of the bio types of meetings that are had, the Bio Europe, both of those, Bio International, CEO and bio CEO investor. All of those are things that we sign contracts with bio at the beginning of the year, and we're already tied into those through 2020. We also do our search and evaluation or scout groups. The folks that are looking for the science will attend many different scientific meetings, ASH or you name it. They are off finding science any way that they can, and honestly, those relationships are probably the best source of ideas. We'll meet with someone at a conference and continue to have some dialogue after that, and as relationships get built, that's where you find the opportunities that probably hold the most interest. But we do that by going to these individual conferences. Just the conferences where Lilly, the Corporate Business Development Group, has sponsored the events, we're like 1,500 different individual meetings this year. If you go to all the different bio events, that doesn't include the scientific meetings. That doesn't include all the things that our cardio group, that our oncology group are going to. That doesn't include any of those. So we have new interactions with scientists all the time, and it's critical because science is moving that fast. We jumped into digital health space recently. That's a whole different thing. It's an entirely different idea, and building relationships with the experts outside is vital to enable that to move it forward.
And Chris, is that something that Ipsen is investing in as well? These sort of short meetings, just a chance to touch base with someone, start a conversation?
Sure, we hit the same meetings. We hit Bio Europe, both the spring and the fall meeting. I think we had somebody at BioAsia this year. We'll have our usual presence at JP Morgan, just like all the other pharma companies as well. We try to get out to the scientific meetings, the CEO and bio investor meetings like that as well. We're trying to, again, meet people on a regular basis, build and maintain the relationships.
And just a final question to you, Chris, and then I'll give the same question to you, Tim. Is there a channel that a biotech is going to use that's going to be more effective for making that first contact? Is there one that seems to be paying off a little bit more for the biotech trying to get your attention?
We touch the biotechs in a number of different ways. I mean, direct email is always the easiest way, but scientific meetings, partnering meetings, we meet regularly with different VCs and investment bankers, so they're constantly bringing us new ideas as well. All of those seem to work pretty well. At the end of the day, they'll, however it comes in through the organization, it'll make its way to external innovation.
And Tim, there's no one channel that's any better than another?
There isn't one channel that's better. The one thing that I would always encourage people to do is you go to our website and look at our partnering. There's a tab on top that says partners, where that'll give you an understanding of what Lilly's interested in. If Lilly is going to be at an event that you're going to be at, I would encourage anyone to request a meeting in that space. Those are looked over very carefully. We usually have a large team that works towards making sure that the requests that we get, we had over 1,000 meeting requests last year at Bio International. We have people that look at those very closely and make the connections of the right individual to take those meetings. That's the best place probably to meet somebody new for the first time if you haven't talked to Lilly before. One of those types of events is probably one of the best ways to do that. We also actually run events in Boston and in California, where we just take out a large group of scientists, 20 scientists, and work with the industry organizations that are out there to say, hey, we're coming out, we want to talk to you, send us a request to come in. And we work with Mass Bio and a couple of different organizations out in California to do those types of events. And those, if you're a part of those organizations, you'll get those advertisements as well. If you see that, if you see us that we're going to be in the same place, ask to meet.
Fantastic. I'm going to turn now to some of the questions that have come in while we've been talking here. First one came in for you, Chris, and it's from David. Chris, you moved from a large organization to a small one, or I guess to a smaller one. Is there something different about doing BD at a smaller company as compared to a big pharma company?
I think the main challenge for us is, in terms of the amount of resources we have at hand at any given time. We don't have as large an organization, especially in R&D and to some extent in scouting as I had when I was at Lilly, for example. And so, in addition to tapping sometimes on the same subject matter experts within our organization, we're leveraging external consultants, probably more than I did at Lilly, just because for resourcing and for capacity. That's the main challenge. I think at a smaller organization, we're still hungry to do deals. We have, one of the things I think with Ipsen is we'll do deals in spaces in terms of what we think the projected revenue would be that's significantly lower than where big pharma might want to play. Our company is roughly a $2.5 billion revenue organization. So a compound that might sell for, that might generate $300 million in revenue is going to be over 10% of growth, which is a significant mover for us, where a pharma company may not necessarily be interested in something that's small. And the same thing in rare disease is, again, you're working with very small numbers of patients, and so the business case is a little bit different than where some other companies may want to play.
Tim, I'll direct this next question to you. It's from Jack. What are the out-licensing processes at your organization?
So it's the same groups that work work to end license. It's the same groups, similar types of processes, just in reverse. I think the challenge is that one of the things that we do is we'll use those relationships that we have to identify who might actually be looking for an asset that we may be putting on the shelf or wanting to do something with it from an external perspective. There's several reasons that we will out-license a molecule. And it's not just we're not interested in it anymore. It may be because we feel that it may be prioritized higher somewhere else, and that it's still something that may be great for patients, but it's just not something that we can put the effort into. And so we use those relationships. We have experts who know the industry, who have a pretty good idea of what groups might be interested, and we start shopping it. We start trying to identify who might be willing to take a look at this thing. And actually, Chris is one of our poster children from a historical perspective. He took an asset to 75 different groups in the years past, and that's a lot. Once we find someone that's interested, then it's really just the same process in reverse. Tell us what you're interested in. Let's start to open up some of our confidential data, maybe get into diligence, then start talking terms. Very similar, and it's the same groups that work on those, and they've done a fair amount in both spaces, so they have the expertise to know how to get a deal structured.
Okay. Tim, this question is also for you from Luke. You use the metaphor of a tornado, and Luke's just interested in how that differs from a funnel. Well,
the funnel itself is kind of cut off. If you think of the big cloud that's above, a tornado comes from a series of clouds, and usually it's not very structured above the actual funnel cloud itself. The large ice cream cone part, if you will, that sits on top usually isn't well organized, isn't as streamlined. But once it gets into the actual funnel itself, everything is moving down to that point at the bottom. And the reality is that that's kind of the way that our process internally works. Once it gets into a little bit beyond the confidential discussions where we start talking terms, everything then becomes much more aligned towards a very focused point. All the groups are speaking the same language. There's a very clear direction that we're heading to, but above that, it is there's no clear direction on where anything is going to go, and that's really once it starts to fall into the actual funnel, things change rapidly. A lot more people get involved. There's much more focus on where we're going, and a much clearer idea of what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay, another question's come in, and I'm just lacking the name here, but the question is, can you outline your process after triage and how you actually use software like Innova to follow up on your assets?
Chris,
sure. Take that first, I guess. So after triage, generally we'll start an evaluation team. If there is interest in taking that asset forward, we'll actually create a specific team, pre-diligence team, for that particular opportunity. That pre-diligence team will try to identify and then address the key questions that we think would be most critical in terms of the success or failure of that particular opportunity. Providing it goes forward from there, we create a full due diligence team. We go through the due diligence process, and then post-diligence becomes more of a transactional opportunity. Our BD folks are part of the team even from the very beginning, so we don't wait until diligence to engage business development. They're at the front end of the process, and both external innovation and business development stay on throughout the entire process.
Another question here says, how do our processes and diligence requirements differ for an early stage technology versus an in-licensing deal for a drug?
They're very similar processes, and we don't have different processes for that. There may be different components from the subject matter experts. For example, if it's very early stage, they may not have any regulatory interactions yet, certainly no clinical data, but we would still want, so we would focus really on the chemistry or biology that led to the decision to make the molecule, evaluate the IND enabling work if that work has been completed, or if not, what the gaps are, what would need to be completed. On the later stage molecules, obviously we still pay attention to the target validation. We pay attention to the chemistry if it's a small molecule, and then all of the IND enabling activities as well. In addition to the downstream, the clinical trial design, the human safety, the clinical pharmacology and pharmacokinetics, and then CMC. And legal's always their way as well, because obviously, I mean, you're licensing intellectual property, and we want to make sure that's buttoned up, whether it's early or late stage.
And Tim, the same question there, early stage technology versus in-licensing.
I think the biggest distinction that we will draw is what diligence means when we're looking at a phase 1 or phase 2 asset versus a technology or a target that's very early on. We may not do the full-blown technical due diligence process that we do for the later stage assets. However, similar people with similar expertise will still be involved in looking at it. We like Ipsen, will engage our business development folks early. It's kind of an inverted triangle, if you will, if you think in terms of the involvement. Our search and evaluation scientists become less involved over time, and our business development folks become more involved over time. but neither group is absent during the process as a whole, just to make sure that there's clarity around what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And things change. We may start with as an M&A and it goes to a license and it ends up as a collaboration. Very, very likely. None of the processes themselves really change that much from a technical perspective. The real question is, do we turn the key on our big due diligence process, or do we have a smaller, more tailored diligence assessment?
Does and this is another question here, does the same hold true for BD practices in relation to CDMOs for manufacturing products within the pipeline?
I can't speak to that because we don't, at least our external innovation group doesn't cover that. If CDMOs would be covered by the function, whether it's a clinical development function or CMC function, they do their own assessment. When we do a due diligence on another company's product, however, our CMC group, we evaluate all of the contracts, the quality inspections, et cetera, whether it's a CMO or a clinical development organization. So from that element, looking at the partner's choice of third parties, we assess all of that, but that's done by our local function for the due diligence team. Those local functions are responsible for doing that work for their own things. They don't bring us into that.
And Tim, can you speak to the CDMOs? No.
We really don't. Our development or external innovation group doesn't invest themselves in those types of activities as well.
Okay, we've got one final question here, and I'll give you just about 30 seconds each. Maybe first to you, Tim. You mentioned, or both of you mentioned, about the importance of experience on your BD teams, but the question is quite simple. How do you attract experienced people to your organization? Well,
we will pull people in that from either the therapeutic areas or the business units that have been involved in deals. And so they've seen it, they've been tasked in their roles with the outside of that external innovation engine to do this type of work. And so those are individuals that are targeted. We also go through a fairly lengthy process of having them shadow other people on projects over time so that they can learn. Obviously, they don't get thrown into the big M&As first, but they help with those things. And so we build that expertise over time as well.
And Chris, how do you bring experienced people into Ipsen?
Well, one way people learn experience is participating on the due diligence teams, because they can, through that process actually see not only kind of what the diligence is all about, but also what the considerations are. And so, that's a good way of gaining some of the necessary experience for people who might want to move into this phase. When we recruit externally, for external innovation, we not only want people with scientific background, but we also want them to have touched external innovation. Whether it's early phase or late phase, it's not as important. It's more from a standpoint of, what type of activities, whether it's participation in due diligence or scouting or, moving over from an external innovation organization. We just want to make sure somebody has, kind of transitioned from, a bench contributor type of role to an external contributor type of role.
Fantastic. Look, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Tim. Thank you to everyone for coming here today for our webinar. We're going to distribute a link not too long after the webinar. You'll be able to download it, share it with others in your organization who couldn't get here. Thank you both for joining me, and thank you all for participating in our webinar today at Inova.
Thanks, Dylan.